I think the inspiration for him came from his education. In the first place, he found out through a history of Whalley by Reverend Whitaker that his family had been an old family in the Burnley area of Lancashire, and he became very interested in genealogy and heraldry as a result. And as you know, local history in the 1800s was largely genealogy and heraldry, and that of the landed families. And when he discovered all this, he went up to Burnley to see the old family house and found out all about his family. That was his first inspiration. His second inspiration, I'm sure, was education through Thomas Bancroft, who had been a headmaster of the King's School in Chester, and who, at the time that Ormerod knew him, was vicar of Bolton, St George's Church in Bolton. And to cut a long story short, Ormerod spent a time with him as a private pupil, and Thomas Bancroft was very inspirational as a character. He had this reputation as a clergyman in that respect too. And two things that we might draw out of it, are most important to say, is that if you had a capability, you must use it. And the second thing was that if you started to do something with that capability, you must complete it. And I think those two things, coupled with everything else that went on, gave Ormerod the inspiration to do this work. Because plainly, George Ormerod was born into a good family. He was raised in Lancashire and then later on Cheshire, and he became a gentleman. There's no question he didn't have to do any work. He had money through the family, and yet he took this work on, which was a very onerous task, and took him from 1811 to 1819 to complete. And through that period he was really almost 100% occupied with it. I think that was really the inspiration that brought him into it. One final inspiration, of course, we should mention, was his wife-to-be, Sarah Latham, because they were a Cheshire family. And when we said that Ormerod was inspired by the thought of genealogy and heraldry, that was the subject. And when we talk about the fact that he was interested in writing, which he was carrying through with Bancroft's push, then the third thing is Cheshire itself. Why did he choose Cheshire? And what inspired him there was the fact that through Sarah he met Sarah's father, Dr. Latham. And Dr. Latham was a medical man, and he was actually a physician to the Prince Regent at the time, Future George IV. And we're talking about the sort of 1800 period and after. George and Sarah were married in 1808. And we don't have much information about their relationship at all. In fact, they must have got rid of a lot of letters, I think. But it's plain that in that period, George Ormerod got very interested in Cheshire indeed. First of all, because he was visiting his wife-to-be in their home in Bradwell near Sandbach, Cheshire, and learnt about their families. And in fact, Dr. Latham was very keen for George Ormerod to work out their own family tree, the Latham family tree, and place it at the College of Arms along with his own. And then there was the fact that there was a man called William Latham who was constantly trying to get himself on the same family tree as the other Lathams. And he didn't succeed in that, but he actually gave them information that he himself had actually worked on the history of Cheshire. And he spent a year on that and been defeated by ill health, in fact, so he said. Didn't carry it any further, but he said, here is an opportunity. And I think Ormerod picked up on that. He discovered that this William Latham had sold his papers to a Dr. Wilkinson in London, and so after George Ormerod and Sarah were married, they were invited to follow Dr. Latham back to London. He's working in London as a physician, and as a result of that, they met this Dr. Wilkinson. And Dr. Wilkinson willingly gave over the papers to George Ormerod, and that is how George started to work on Cheshire. that is his complete inspiration, I think. George actually met, I think, the future George IV while he was down in London. There was every opportunity for him to do that, and as you will see from the first edition of History of Cheshire, he dedicated those volumes to the Prince Regent.